We've all seen that movie montage, haven't we? You know, the lone genius working late nights.
Yeah, totally. Coffee cups everywhere.
Exactly. Fueled by passion, and then boom, they hit on this incredible idea. Next thing they're like on magazine covers.
It's the classic story. A revolutionary product, pure grit equals success. Guaranteed.
But that's the fairy tale, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's compelling, but having worked with, hundreds of entrepreneurs, the reality is, well, it's usually quite different.
How so?
Well, most startups just don't make it to that cover story. And most new products, frankly, they just fizzle out. They don't get that traction.
Which is exactly why we wanted to do this deep dive today. If that standard story is, misleading, then what actually is a startup? How should we even think about building something new when everything feels so uncertain?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And one of the sources we're looking at has this really useful definition that doesn't focus on size or anything like that. It says a startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. That's a direct quote.
Extreme uncertainty, that feels right.
It does. And I think it's helpful because it widens the lens. An entrepreneur isn't just a person in the garage anymore.
Right, it could be. Like a team inside a big company trying something totally new.
Exactly. Like Intuit, mentioned in the source. They face their own massive uncertainties launching new things.
So it blows up that whole lone genius idea too. And it's not just about having the brilliant product vision either.
No, and that's another key point for the source. The author says quite boldly, entrepreneurship is management.
That line really stuck with me. It makes you stop and rethink everything. Management for a startup.
It sounds almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it's crucial. Because when you're in that extreme uncertainty, the old management playbooks, they just don't apply.
They're built for predictability.
Precisely. Startups need something different, a new kind of management designed for chaos almost.
Okay, so let's get into that. For this part of our deep dive, we're focusing on this idea of vision, which the source says is like the foundation for this new entrepreneurial management. So our mission here really is to figure out this new way startups can tell if they're actually making progress, something different from just, shipping features or hitting sales targets.
Exactly. And you need that new measure because traditional business strategy often falls short when you're innovating. Think about the frustrations they faced at IMVU, which the author discusses.
Right. They were working hard, building things.
Loads of effort. But the results weren't lining up. It showed this disconnect between just doing stuff and actually moving forward. That's why we need a different way to look at it.
And that brings us to validated learning, right? The source positions this as the essential unit of progress.
Yes. Validated learning. Not just learning, but validated learning.
What's the distinction there?
It means the learning you're doing is actually proven out by improvements in the startup's core metrics. You see the needle move on things that matter. It's not just about building features or putting in long hours.
So progress isn't just activity?
Not at all. The author says learning is the essential unit of progress for startups, but it has to be demonstrated. You need evidence. And this is tricky because, as the source notes, learning sometimes gets a bad rap.
Why is that?
Because you can't, take learning to the bank immediately. It doesn't always translate directly into dollars today. Investors, employees, they want to see tangible results.
Sure, that makes sense. So how does this play out in practice? The IMVU example sounds key here.
It really is. Their early strategy involved building an add-on for existing IM platforms, like AIM or MSN Messenger back in the day.
Because they figured people wouldn't want to switch networks.
Exactly. Those are core assumptions.
Yeah.
They're reasonable one, maybe, on the surface. So they put a ton of work into making this add-on work across different platforms. But then the learning started happening. Or rather, the lack of traction forced them to learn. They had this big aha moment.
What did they find out?
Well, it turns out people were willing to try a new standalone network. They weren't tied to the old ones. And even more, they were happy to bring their friends over.
Wow. Okay, so the whole add-on idea was based on a faulty premise.
Completely. And there was another layer, too. They assumed people would primarily use these avatars to chat with their existing friends. Wrong again. What people were really excited about was meeting new people through the platform, using avatars to connect with strangers.
That's fascinating. It's almost the exact opposite of their initial vision in some ways.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Which just highlights how vital it is to actually discover what customers want, not just assume you know.
And this ties into the idea of waste in a startup context.
Directly. The source defines waste as anything that doesn't contribute to validated learning. So think about all that effort IMVU put in to making their add-on compatible with multiple IM clients.
That interoperability piece.
Yeah. Was building all of that complexity really necessary to learn that their core assumptions about add-ons versus standalone and existing versus new friends were wrong?
Probably not, right? It makes you wonder.
Could they have learned it faster? Cheaper?
The author even floats that thought experiment. What if they just described the product, the features, before building anything? Would the initial lack of interest have told them something crucial, saving months of coding?
It really forces you to prioritize learning over just like sheer production. Build, build, build isn't always the answer.
But it's not just about asking customers what they want and blindly doing it, is it?
No, definitely not. It's a synthesis. It's about blending the entrepreneur's vision, that initial spark, the problem they see with what the customers are actually demonstrating they need through their behavior. It's finding that sweet spot, not just dictating, but not just reacting either.
So back to IMVU, when they were just building features based on their original assumptions, their metrics weren't improving, even if the product looked better.
Right. They're spinning your wheels, in a way. But once they pivoted their strategy, based on what they'd learned, focusing on the standalone network, facilitating new connections.
Then things started to click.
Exactly. Product development suddenly became way more productive because it was aimed at what people actually valued. And the metrics, the signups, the engagement started to improve, validating that the learning was real.
And this idea of validated learning is also important for keeping everyone honest, right? Like employees, investors.
Hugely important. It's a way to show real, demonstrable progress, not just founder optimism or, vanity metrics. It helps avoid self-delusion. Productivity in a startup, the source argues, is validated learning, and not lines of code, not features shipped.
Okay, I get the what and the why, but how do you actually do this? How do you get validated learning?
Through experiments. That's the tool. It's not about building the whole grand vision at once and hoping it works.
You test things.
You test your assumptions.
Yeah.
Systematically. The source gives the early Zappos example, which is brilliant.
The shoe photos.
Yeah. Instead of building a massive online store and inventory system, the founder just went to local shoe stores, took pictures, put them online.
And only bought the shoe if someone actually ordered it online.
Exactly. It was a super simple, low-cost experiment to test one massive core hypothesis. Would people actually buy shoes online without trying them on first?
That's genius. Minimal effort for maximum learning on a critical question.
That's the essence of it.
So, wrapping up this section then, it feels like the whole romantic startup narrative needs this major reality check. A modern startup's vision isn't just a fixed blueprint.
No, it has to be dynamic.
It needs to be grounded in this relentless commitment to validated learning, constantly adapting based on what you find out about your customers, even if it means fundamentally changing your original idea.
That's the core message. It's about shifting from just executing a predetermined plan to engaging in this continuous cycle. Build a little, measure the impact, learn from it, adapt.
Okay, so let's quickly recap what we've covered in this part of the deep dive. We started by kind of busting the myth of the guaranteed startup success story.
The fairy tale version.
We defined a startup, using the source's definition, as basically an organization searching for a business model under extreme uncertainty.
And stress that entrepreneurship, in this context, really is a form of management, just a very different kind.
And the big takeaway from digging into vision is this concept of validated learning. That's the true north, the real measure of progress, not just building stuff or hitting traditional milestones.
It's about rigorously testing your assumptions and letting the evidence guide you. Understanding what customers truly demonstrate they want is absolutely fundamental.
It definitely makes you think differently. I mean, stepping back, how could focusing on validated learning instead of just, say, output or deadlines change how you, listening, might approach a new project, even if it's not a tech startup?
Yeah. What if learning and adaptation became the primary goal in your own work or initiatives? What might change? It's a powerful question.
Definitely something to chew on. And this is really just scratching the surface, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. We've talked about the what and why of validated learning, but there's much more to explore around the how, the actual mechanics of experimentation, that build, measure, learn loop everyone talks about, and the really tough decisions around pivoting.
Looking forward to digging into those next time.